Welcome to the show today. We are going to have a lot of fun here on the Promise brand. You and I had a conversation a couple weeks back on your LinkedIn Live talking through Proverbs of leadership, talking about team dynamics. What a wonderful conversation we had. Tell the folks here who might not know about you, might not know about Solomon, the Golden Retriever, what is the purpose behind your new book, which I believe is not officially out yet. Is that true? Proverbs for Leadership?
No, it is out. So
Okay.
Proverbs for Leadership, for the podcast people, you can't see, I'm holding it in my hands. For those of you that are seeing this recorded on YouTube or LinkedIn or wherever it gets posted, this is it. Proverbs for Leadership. You must understand yourself and improve if you desire leadership that produces success in others.
Beautiful.
My book is about my journey through business, the things that I learned, how I should have improved looking back on it, how I have improved, and how I ended up taking the focus off myself for success and put it on the success of my teams, which then produced even greater success for myself. Sometimes I was really good at that, and other times I failed miserably.
Yeah.
That is what I talk about in the book.
I love it. I love it. And we had such a good conversation talking about one of your chapters in the book and based on teams and conversation. And you do a great job. You guys got to go check it out. Sean does a great job interviewing people based on chapters in his book. And I thought that is such a fun idea. Now, Sean, as I think about the book, as I think about your life, I think about leadership, I think about the failures that I've had. I think about the successes I've had in leadership or following leaders. I mean, we've all seen great leaders. We've all seen terrible leaders. We've seen great leaders do terrible things. Along your journey, what has maybe been one of the most memorable times or memorable experience you had following a leader?
So there's one time, as you were asking the question, the story I'm going to tell you, the account of what happened for anyone that lived through the coming of the online era. When I joined the business world, it was all about the fax machine. And when I tell you this story, you're going to understand why within 2 days of Litvak, of Proverbs for Leadership being released, it became an international bestseller across the United States and Canada in the first 2 days on Amazon.
Congrats.
Thank you. So what happened was, before high-speed internet was a thing that was just everyday world life and wired into everybody's house, there was this terrible thing called dial-up. And, have you ever heard this noise?
Yeah.
Well, that's what it used to be when you went online. And at the job that I had at the time, y'all can figure that out if you know when we went from dial-up to high speed, when both were happening. I did an analysis that it was cheaper to get high-speed internet for the office that I worked in, that I led, versus the dedicated dial-up line. So without asking anybody if it was okay, I just made the change. Well, when my immediate supervisor, who lived in another town, came to visit me, my immediate supervisor was somewhat beside themselves that I would make such a decision, make such an investment, going on and on about it, into this without asking for permission.
Wow.
And when I showed my immediate supervisor that we were saving money and having better service, I was still told, well, you still should have gotten my permission. That is one of the leadership lessons that will stay with me forever.
Yeah.
Because if you know it's the right thing to do, and if you're going to improve productivity,
Yeah.
and if you're going to save money, You don't need to ask permission. You may need to ask forgiveness,
Yeah.
but a real leader will understand when you explain it to them.
Are you telling
That's
me?
my opening salvo for our
Are you
conversation.
telling me you got a slap on the wrist, maybe worse for decreasing cost and increasing profit?
Yes,
Terrible.
yes, and increasing productivity because we could all be online at the same time. Otherwise, we had to take turns being
Oh
online.
my
That's
goodness.
how it was in the world of dial-up.
Listen, the microwave was also scary for people. The
Because food was so quick.
I don't know. It was new.
Yeah,
When new things come into the world, people are scary, and people are tend to be afraid. You know, in the marketing world, you know, we talk kind of about the laggards. Those are the people who, when something new comes out, it's like they take forever to get there because
yeah,
they're afraid of the new thing. And then there's the early adopters, right?
right.
And then there's sort of this middle kind of phase of the people who are influenced by the early adopters. As you have worked for the companies you've worked for and kind of, you know, working on your own organization and your own philosophies here, as far as leadership crosses over with brand, what have been some things over time that you've recognized in terms of like brands growing and innovating? Like, what's the correlation with an innovating brand and the leadership within that brand?
So more people follow Bill Gates on social media than they follow Microsoft. More people follow Elon Musk on various social media platforms than they follow Twitter, SpaceX, Tesla, etc. There needs to be, and it's a double-edged sword, there needs to be a visionary as the leader in any organization. However, you cannot have a personality driven organization because if you have a personality driven organization as opposed to a leadership team, when that personality leaves, everything crumbles. You need to have a leadership team, you need to have a visionary, but that individual needs to be surrounded by the people that can implement and get things done. And I think it's the same thing with brand. Without Elon Musk, people wouldn't be so excited about Tesla. There's other electric car companies out there. I'm not going to name them because which one does everyone think of? Tesla, because of Elon Musk. There's other operating systems out there. But what do people think of, unless you're an Apple person? Windows, because of Bill Gates. I'm sure that we can look at other leaders out there and what they are in charge of. Social media. People think of Zuckerberg for Facebook, whether you like it or not, whether you're on Facebook or not. Facebook, Instagram, you know, you've got to have that visionary, but then they need to have a team that builds out the brand.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question?
I love it. Where, you know, so primarily for your career, you have been in the role of sales, correct?
I've been, well, yes and no. I
Okay.
started in sales,
Okay.
and when I moved from Chicago to Louisville, those years ago, I outsold our operation. So I was punished by being put in charge of operations, in addition to retaining my sales responsibilities.
Sure.
So for the vast majority of my career, I was either in sales and operations, or really what I was doing once I got past the beginnings of my career, I was leading sales teams and leading operations teams. Where normally in the organizations that I was in, there would be a sales leader and an operations leader. Well, the group that I had, both teams reported in through me. So they had to be able to get along and work out the natural issues between sales and
That's awesome.
operations.
You know, as I work with many clients, I find that brand inconsistencies or brand consistencies aren't usually like we might think of brand and we think probably immediately marketing or advertising because that's what the customer sees. But in reality, brand is well baked into an organization. It's well baked into the leadership. It's well baked into the operations and the sales and the communication to the core of who a company is. As you've seen it from operations and from sales, how have some good brands that you've worked for impacted operations and sales? How have bad brand decisions impacted operations and sales? What have your experiences been like from that C-suite level kind of, hey, this is the brand strategy we're going with? How has that either impacted, or how have you been able to kind of impact strategy in the positions that you've had?
So I would tell you, I have 3 experiences, whether it's an organization that is HR driven and you're all about putting aside risk, whether you're operations driven, making sure that everything is easily executable, or whether you're sales driven, that it's all about bringing in the top line. I don't think any of those, and I've had experiences with all 3, is the way an organization should be run. I believe an organization should be run as Simon Sinek says it should be. Start with why.
Yeah.
You need to not how, not what, start with why. An organization needs to be able to communicate to their client base, their future client base, their interest base, why their brand is going to solve an issue in their life. Not how they're going to solve the issue, not even what they're going to do or what the issue is necessarily, but why they solve issues. And Apple does a tremendous job of that. That's the example that Simon Sinek uses. But there's other companies out there that do it. I would say Amazon does a tremendous job of it, and I'm sure it's somewhere in their marketing material. But I need some super glue. Okay, and I asked my wife before we hopped on this recording, hey, where's the super glue? Because she has her closet for stuff that I'll put things in that I shouldn't. I have my areas for stuff that sometimes, it's our house, but we have areas for our stuff, okay? Yeah. And we have no super glue. And my wife said to me, she said, I think you need to get more super glue. So we're recording this right now, you and I, on a Thursday evening after 5 o'clock. And I know I need to glue something this weekend, at some point over the weekend. I didn't make a note, go buy super glue. What did I do? I hopped onto Amazon. Sure. And I just ordered super glue, and it's going to be here Saturday at some point. Yeah. Which gives me either Saturday night or Sunday to glue this one little thing, because when it's super glue, it's a quick glue, let's be honest. You're not like using it for hours. It's for 2 minutes. You're going to do something. But what Amazon has done is they have solved the need of running to the store for something that you don't need immediately. Sure. And in some geographies, like New York, they have, or even in Chicago, not in Louisville where I live, you can order things and get them the same day. Oh yeah. So they have solved their why, their need that they have solved is getting something quickly. Yeah. Yeah. And that is what businesses in general should, regardless of the industry, for parable story, your why, I would think is, start with why. You are making sure that people understand your client's heartfelt emotion, I'm probably not saying it well, of what they want to do for someone. You are helping someone communicate their why. Yeah. That is your why. Or something like that.
Something like it. Something like it. We certainly balance, one of the first podcasts I ever hosted was actually called The Why Blog, where I, based off of Simon Sinek's whole message, interviewed entrepreneurs about their why in business, which eventually got me to this place where I, you could say, help other businesses, help them find their purpose and their mission and their vision and all of that. Those are very important things. They're real. They're these like somewhat ethereal things that if you have really good leadership, they can become tangible. And as you were writing your book, Proverbs for Leadership, I'm curious throughout your experiences, where have you seen, and maybe you wrote something about this, but where have you seen those mission, vision, values tangibly show up in the circle of leadership?
So I would tell you that I think calling, mission, and vision is a very personal thing. Many companies have a mission statement. Many companies have a vision statement. I don't think many companies know the difference between the two,
Sure.
or even what a calling should be. In Proverbs for Leadership, what I ended up writing about, because I initially was going to write a book on how business should be conducted, which thank God I didn't write that book. I think that was why I struggled for 6 or 7 years in my writing until I finally came upon a book of personal improvement and taking the focus off yourself to help others succeed instead.
Yeah.
And, with mission and vision, I know what my calling is, and I know what the vision is that I want to end up at. And the mission is what connects the two.
Yeah,
it's the
sure.
how you do it. And I don't know if companies I don't know very many companies that are bold enough to say that, because they are too concerned about the bottom line. Don't get me wrong, every company's got to be profitable, every household has
They
to be
should be.
profitable. But at the same time, there should be a higher calling that everyone is involved with, and they understand why. And I can't name the study, but I've seen the video on it, and you're probably familiar with this, that Hilton Hotels, there is either it's a documentary or a training or something where people went into Hilton Hotels, and they Hilton had this whole program how everyone understood what the purpose, they use the word purpose, of Hilton Hotels were. So regardless of whether you were talking to the executive team or the desk clerk or the concierge or the maid cleaning your room, every single person could communicate the purpose of Hilton Hotels in their own language.
Yeah.
And I don't mean Spanish English, I mean in the way that they communicated.
Right.
And at the same time, they knew what their purpose was within Hilton Hotels.
Man, that's so good.
So in my opinion, an organization
Yep.
needs to communicate their purpose so then it can be disseminated
Yep.
across the organization, and each individual can know how what they're doing contributes to the overall purpose.
This is such an interesting thing to me, because oftentimes mission does feel so intangible. Visions feel so, okay, yep, that's something the leadership team has to do. I have to get my job done because I need to make bills at the end of the day and make money, and right. We all have kind of the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We've got to fulfill these things. But at the end of the day, when all of those things are fulfilled, for the people that you've led, Sean, what has an overarching mission done for those people when you've given them space to connect it to themselves?
I'll have to consider that for a moment. I really believe what it has done for them is they have realized that they are more than they thought they were. They are greater than what others have told them they were. And they have seen a vision for themselves of what they can achieve that was beyond what they had thought of themselves previously. And this is when I was successful in leadership.
Yeah.
When I wasn't successful, none of that happened.
Yeah.
Okay? And I am not by any means saying that even the majority of time I have been successful, because I've been in business since I've been in the janitorial industry since 1991, and I had a couple jobs before that. But, in the industry that I've been in, when I've led teams properly, when I've put myself aside, when I've understood and had a greater sense of self, when I would open myself up to listening to God and quiet my own mind and allow myself to hear from God and know what I should be doing, then I was able to lead more effectively and help people to figure things out. I mean, frankly, if you give someone authority and you give someone the room to do what needs to be done and they make a mistake, what is the worst thing that's going to happen? The client will be upset.
Yeah.
Okay, the client's going to be upset anyways at some point. But you're giving someone, and I'm not saying purposely let the client be upset. Don't misunderstand me.
Make your people happy, guys.
But you have to give your people room to expand. And in my book, Proverbs for Leadership, I give examples of how I did that in the past. And people really surprised me.
Yeah. I love it.
In a good way.
I love it. As you look at your history, your experience, as you're building what is becoming Litvak Leadership and an amazing book, Proverbs for Leadership, I'm sure you've got more that you want to do with it. What would you say is the real differentiating factor? There's a lot of leadership books. There's a lot of leadership gurus out there. There's the Tony Robbins and the John C. Maxwells and all these people wanting to accomplish some level of leadership. What would you say is your differentiating factor, Sean?
It's two things. When I interviewed multiple publishers for my book before I ended up choosing who I was going to partner with, the one that I ended up partnering with after they read the book, when we had the conversation, what really sold me on them, and it's RTI Publishing, Kim Thompson Pinder. You can find her on LinkedIn. What differentiated Kim and her company from the other companies that I had spoken to, and there's all kinds of companies out there that will publish your book.
Yeah.
Kim said to me, Sean, you have a very strong message. There's a lot of wisdom in here, a lot of nuggets, a lot of things people will be able to understand and grab onto. But there's one flaw that you're going to have to decide how to correct. And that flaw was, in my writing process, I had made a list of topics I wanted to cover.
Sure.
And then for each topic, I had found a long list of scripture for each of the topics that I wanted to weave into the book.
Gotcha.
Well, I wove them into the book, but I didn't cite them. I didn't plagiarize them, but I talked all around scripture. And Kim, being a Christian and being familiar with the Bible, said to me, the Christians aren't going to like your book because they're going to say this is nothing but scripture that Sean is just regurgitating out, which she said isn't true, but they could read it that way.
Sure.
She said the non-Christians aren't going to read it because they're going to say it's just common sense, because isn't that what scripture is, but people don't realize it? So you need to decide, Sean, are you going to cite all the scripture in the book? And the book is probably 5% or less scripture, okay? But it's enough that, it makes an impact on people. 5% is a lot, kind of, when you think about it. Or are you going to pull it all out? Because right now you're walking down the yellow line in the middle of the highway and you're going to get hit on both sides. Which way do you want to go? And I thought about it for a very short while and I said, I'm going to cite all the scripture.
Yeah.
Because I've always been a faith person.
Sure.
Back from when I was practicing Judaism, or grew up Jewish, considered going to rabbinic school, to even when I became a Christian, I've always been a faith person. Have I been a perfect faith person? Absolutely not. Have I improved over time? Absolutely. That's called walking out your faith,
There you
people.
go.
And by citing the scripture and calling it out in my book, it really speaks to that, yes, I'm telling you stories about what has happened in my life and what I have realized, and here is the scriptural foundation for it. And I invite you, as the reader, to come to know Jesus Christ while you're reading the book. I don't have an altar call in the book, but at the same time, I don't see why people wouldn't want to
Sure.
embrace faith after reading my book.
So, Sean, our company being called Parable Brand, whether it's biblically based or not, we believe that a parable is this thing. It's a short story that is likely spoken to the right people at the right time that leaves massive impact. And I believe that businesses have that. I believe that individuals have that. And it's something we can kind of unify around, right? But it means there's a bigger picture. But if we were to give you the chance to kind of share your parable, what would you say it is?
So the outline of my parable is the subtitle of my book. You must understand yourself and improve if you desire leadership that produces success in others.
Yeah.
And my aha moment came when I was told for the umpteenth time in my career that I needed to have greater personal awareness because I was the guy that held myself to a very high standard. And the reason I held myself to a very high standard was my father held himself to a very high standard.
Sure.
And his father held himself to a very high standard. And we weren't perfect people. Don't get me, don't think I'm saying that, but the standard that we held ourselves to as to how we did things was probably, to my children have told me that I held them to a very high standard, but they saw me holding myself to that same standard, so they got it and they understood it. They didn't always like it, and I have adult children now, and we've talked about this. But my coworkers did not like that I would hold them to the same standard that I held myself to. I was told on multiple times that I was too hard on people. I was too tough. I was too demanding.
Yeah.
I would send people emails, and I have to watch myself now, even to this day, that when I ask a question, if I know it's someone that doesn't normally answer back, I will say, hey, can you get this to me by, and I'll give them a date.
Yeah.
Setting an expectation as to when I will get an answer. So what my parable is, what my story is I needed to understand myself and improve and realize that the standard that I hold myself to is not the same standard, good or bad, that others hold themselves to. It is my standard for myself. And at the same time, when I work with others, I need to look and see what I can do to help them achieve in their role, to look good in their role, to always be looking for the opportunity to compliment, to encourage. And again, I'm growing in this still. I'm better than I was, but I have not arrived at it yet, whether it's in personal relationships or professional relationships. And not be so concerned about my own success. Be more concerned about my personal improvement, but just as equally concerned about the other person's success. By focusing on those two areas, that is where my personal success will come from.
I love it. I love it. Sean Litvak, amazing stuff. I got a handful, maybe one or two more questions here for you as we close up. What a fun, enjoyable time to walk through some of these conversations with you. There's a lot to be said about leadership, about brand, about the connection between the two. As you look at the landscape of companies out there, and not just the big ones, you've mentioned a lot of big ones today, maybe companies people don't know about. What is maybe one company that you believe is like crushing it with their brand? And what's another company you see that maybe has a great brand but could use some more support integrated into their company?
So when you talk about two smaller companies that are crushing it, in fact, I'm going to give you three companies that are crushing it right now.
Okay.
There's Perfect Crust Pizza Liners,
Okay.
which is this, and it is a patented piece of paper with dimples on it that goes underneath the pizza in the pizza box. They have a tremendous vice president of sales and marketing, Eric Bam, that has just their branding and their communication is unlike any other company that I have seen. And Eric has, when before COVID started, Eric was doing Instagram lives with pizzerias across the country.
That's awesome.
And when COVID hit, he was still doing Instagram lives, and they stopped it after a while. But Eric is a legend in the pizza community. If you don't know Eric Bam, you need to connect with him. Another company that is even smaller than that is Larry Levine, Selling from the Heart podcast with Daryl Amy, and Larry Levine's book, Selling from the Heart.
Yeah.
It is an international phenomena that when you read Larry's book and listen to Larry and David's podcast, and truth be told, I have appeared on their podcast recently, but I'm not talking about myself.
Yeah.
They bring in subject matter experts in sales to not necessarily tell you something new, but after you've been selling a long time, like myself, it's to remind you of things you have forgotten or no longer implement. And when you read Larry's book, Selling from the Heart, it will renew your spirit on why you should be selling. It is service before self.
I love it.
In a nutshell.
Yeah.
And the third person, and these are all friends of mine too, is Randy Chafee, the hybrid sales warrior. His website is ibuyfromrandy.com. And Randy is a manufacturer's rep in the metal roofing industry, selling nuts, bolts, screws, and everything that fastens metal roofs onto barns and homes. And Randy was a road warrior living on airplanes before COVID hit. COVID hit, he had to sit at home, learn how to do everything virtually. And now Randy does virtual and does in person like no one else does it. He is top notch on that. And you may not have heard of these people if you're not in the pizza industry, if you're not in the sales industry, or if you don't care about metal roofs. But I tell you, these are four people that you need to connect with.
I love it. Love the direction. Love the conversation today, Sean. Where can people get connected with you, follow along in your journey, and support Litvak Leadership, Proverbs for Leadership?
Sure. So I am probably one of the easiest people to find because there are no other Sean, S-E-A-N, Litvaks in the world, L-I-T-V-A-K. So just go to Google or your search engine of choice and type in my name, Sean Litvak, and you'll see all the social media I'm on. Or you can type Litvak Leadership, because almost every post I have ends with the hashtag Litvak Leadership. If you are interested in my book, Proverbs for Leadership, I've made it real easy for you to get a signed copy of the book. Go to proverbsforleadership.com and that's where you can get a signed copy of the book. I will ship it out to you personally, and you'll have a nice little note inside of it also. Um, and really, I could give you an email address, but just message me on social media. You can go to Proverbs for Leadership. You can go to my personal website, litvakleadership.com. I have what I had called an almost weekly email that I would send out to people that I have been very late on as of late. But it's spring, so you can start things anew again.
Wow.
But just go to Proverbs for Leadership, get the book. You'll end up on my email list, and you will hear from me.
I love it. Sean Litvak, Litvak Leadership, my man. Thank you for sharing your heart, your wisdom, and your mind today, my friend.
You bet. So glad you invited me. I really appreciate the opportunity to grow our relationship, Luke, and to talk about my book.